So what is the coronavirus? So the coronavirus was first introduced to the world on December 30th in Wuhan, China, as an unusual case of pneumonia. The initial point of contact is still unknown and currently being researched, but scientists are led to believe that it was first contracted during a purchase at a seafood market. Within the next 50 days, Wuhan, China reported 1,800 deaths in their country, along with the ever-increasing number of 70,000 infected. The news of this novel virus was quickly spread throughout the world, and then panic began to arise. Symptoms such as cough, fever, shortness of breath, and difficulty breathing, additionally loss of sense of smell and taste, and more. The virus soon became deadly through complications within the respiratory system. By January 15th, the virus cases have been reported in 10 more countries, including the US. By January 30th, the World Health Organization, or better known as WHO, declared the virus a worldwide emergency, as 14 more countries were included in the reported cases. This virus began to spread rapidly throughout the globe, and not much information was known, which also began to spread fear. Countries began to lock down their borders, restrict travel, and also place their citizens in quarantine. In China, they strictly enforced quarantine to the point where they would arrest anyone who did not abide by the rules. Still, by March 1st, nearly the entire planet was infected with this disease, and little information was known about keeping the spread of the disease within a close knit of people, and also we didn't have any preventative measures other than social distancing. Scientists did claim that the virus is spread through droplets, like through the air, through either a cough or a sneeze, which also was led to believe that it wouldn't travel more than a few feet, and this is when social distancing was implemented into the world. Countries around the world were implementing this into their society and changing their ways of operations within like restaurants, businesses, and even the education system. Despite efforts being made, the United States became the most infected country on March 25th, 2020, and everyday life was already majorly affected. Students were sent home to the inability of social distancing, and families began to take on the role of their teachers. People were losing jobs, families were experiencing hardships, and the added question of an adequate education was added to the mix. My group's going to talk about how the coronavirus actually impacted our education and what do we think we should do about it.
This is COVID-19 in Elementary Schools by Taylor Hendricks. Student opinion. How is this affecting their academic performance? When schooling is moved 100% online, students are missing out on important aspects of their education, such as social interaction with a peer group or even effective communication with their teachers. A child in an early elementary grade will need quite a bit of support from a parent or caregiver to learn remotely, because developmentally, it is not well matched to have a kindergartner or first grader do remote learning independently with no peer or teacher support whenever it is needed. What are the pros and cons of remote learning? Pro. Schedules and time management, along with social interactions and effective communication through technology, have amplified. Students and parents have benefited from studying at their leisure or whenever works best with their schedule. And a more relaxed learning environment led some districts to move to a pass/fail grading scale. Cons. Parents/guardians of younger students becoming more overwhelmed. Mental health and well-being has magnified in children and adolescents since school closures began, and schools provide a structure that children need to function at their best and succeed. Teachers' opinion. How are they handling the change? Heidi Mizowski, a kindergarten teacher at Roland Park Elementary in Baltimore City, says, "I love hearing their stories and getting their daily hugs. I love watching the children play at recess, creating new games, and including new friends. The human connection side of teaching is what I value most, and with remote learning, it just doesn't feel the same. Teaching is already one of the most demanding and stressful professions for educators have had to manage distance learning, a shift that occurred practically overnight while facing the same stressors everyone else is navigating. Most educators would admit to feelings of loneliness and isolation along with helplessness." The effect on low-income households. The pandemic has been especially hard for Black, Latina, and Native American / Alaska Native children and adolescents, and those living in low-income families. 1 in 5 teens cannot complete schoolwork at home because they do not have a computer or internet connection. For many children and adolescents, schools are also a safe place to be while parents or guardians are working. For many families, schools are where kids get healthy meals, access to the internet, and other vital services. Are elementary schools at lower risk? Because elementary schools have fewer students than high schools, the chances of an infected student entering the classroom is very low. Along with this, because elementary students do not move between classrooms all day, there is less risk of a school-wide outbreak. Conclusion. As calls rise to get more kids back into classrooms for their educational, emotional, and physical health and well-being, we must also not forget the extreme importance of containing the spread of COVID-19 as to continue to see our younger children and generation flourish in a traditional and more welcome learning environment.
Schoolers, there was a huge decrease in academic success. It started off March 13th, at least for us here in Hanover County, and basically where they just went fully online. And for students, that is really, really tough. New studies that I found say that we've lost a whole 3 months of academic gain, at least middle schoolers and high schoolers and elementary school students in particular. And these students are getting really far behind, and it's going to be really hard to catch up. They also are struggling a lot to complete their work. It's hard for a middle school student to sit down and at a computer all day and get every single thing done. They're building their matureness, and that's all really tough for a little middle school kid. You also have to think about lower income families, kids who don't have access to internet all the time or a computer. How are they getting this stuff done? I really just think that this is going to put people really, really far behind, and it's going to be really hard to come back. So a big thing I'm going to emphasize is the no fun part. Being at home, it's not fun. Just sitting at home doing nothing all day, doing online work. You don't get to hang out with your friends. In middle school, this is a huge time that kids get to go out and meet people. Their bodies are changing, everything's changing. They want to go on field trips, all that fun stuff. But with COVID-19, everyone has to stay home. The 2 days of school a week is truly not enough for a little kid to get their social interaction in. Kids who have little social interaction like this could end up, having bad social anxiety or other things like that. Also, middle school is the start, or the big start, of sports and stuff like that. You get to experience your first tryouts and stuff like that, and you get to figure out what sports you want to play. In middle school, most of the people make the team, so everyone gets to try out and have a good chance. But when you get to high school, if you try out for a team, you have a chance of getting cut. And so it just sucks that these kids who are going through this developmental age where they get to figure out all the stuff that they like and everything, they are getting that taken away from them. Because I know personally, I played basketball in middle school, but it kind of told me that I wasn't good enough to play in high school for sure, and that baseball was the route I needed to go. So I feel bad for the kids who are missing out on those opportunities. And you also just get to make a lot of memories in middle school. Like I said, with field trips and stuff, I went on felt like hundreds of field trips during middle school years, because you're growing up, or you're grown up enough to leave, and kind of be on your own, but you still need a teacher behind you, But it's no fun for these kids. That's the main thing. Just some my final thoughts. Obviously, they have been trying really hard to recreate a different experience, recreate what school's like, but it's not gonna happen. They have to make some other alternate experience. You can't build a classroom miles away, in an online Zoom room. It's just not possible. These past 9 months have been really, really tough for not just middle school students, but everyone. But in particular, it puts a lot of stress on these middle schoolers who, they just want to do whatever they want. They get up and they think that it's a free day because they don't have to go to school. So I feel like unless by next semester at least, or even the fall of 2021, if we don't have, either a vaccine to where kids can go, or another way that we can get kids going to school every single day, especially these young kids, it's really going to set them back behind. They're building their mathematics and their and their like reading skills up. Like, this is a very important time that they get those built up, before high school. Whenever you get to those tougher classes, you really need these like basic skills. You got to complete your EOGs, EOCs. So I really hope in the future that it gets changed, because seeing the way that it is affecting these young kids and their academic ability, it really breaks my heart. And I'm very glad and fortunate to be in college when all this went down. So that's it.
Hello, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about how COVID-19 has affected high school students specifically. So first of all, there's been a decrease in academic performance. Most high school students have been entirely online with their courses, which is not the most effective way for students to learn. So high schoolers have struggled to understand material, which has led to a decrease in academic performance, which is not ideal, especially for seniors who need to have good grades and a good understanding before they apply for college. Virtual learning is argued to be inequitable. Many high school students that are receiving special ed services have been struggling with virtual learning. Students with disabilities have an IEP, which is an individualized education program, which they update their IEP each year, and it addresses all of their unique learning needs. So schools are legally obligated to follow what their IEP states for a specific student. And with virtual learning, it's been a challenge to have schools meet those needs. So a lot of parents are frustrated because their student should be getting accommodations, should be getting extra help, and have not because of virtual learning. So that's another, also going back to decrease in academic performance, people with disabilities and students have been regressing a lot as well because they are not getting the tools they need to succeed. So students left out of school activities. High school students have had a hard time dealing with the reality of canceled events. School dances, plays, sporting events, field trips, and graduation have all been canceled or are made to be virtual. Especially student athletes who are scrambling because they no longer have their senior season, which oftentimes is how they get noticed from colleges or how they get scholarships. So that's a hard thing for senior athletes specifically. A couple quotes from some high school students who go to my former school. This is Mariana Lundy, who's a sophomore at Sanderson High School, and she said, "Honestly, it doesn't feel like I'm in high school. I spend hours every day on a computer, and I never see my friends. It's miserable." And then this is Alhagi Jones, who is actually student body president at Sanderson High School. So he's a senior. He said, "We are trying to have everyone stay involved with school, but it is just so hard. All of our events have been virtual and no one wants to participate." So obviously a very hard time for seniors and all students. So school services are no longer available, or they are available, but they're harder to get access to. So many students rely on the school cafeteria for a meal, libraries for books or computers, working computers or magazines, and school counselors for guidance. So these are all services that schools would typically provide for students. And these are really hard to find and get access to with everything being online. While teachers are still attempting to deliver food, I know I've seen like many principals like hand delivering and going out and delivering meals to students, which is awesome, but it's also been a challenge. It's really hard. Seniors also who need guidance for college applications are struggling to meet with their counselors. This is the time of year where seniors are looking to apply for college, and it's been really difficult for lots of seniors to be able to really get the counseling they need for their college applications. There's been an increase in depression, abuse in homes, and suicide rates. So, due to being secluded, all of the quarantining, everything being canceled, having to depend on unreliable technology for school, there's a lack of social interaction and activities. We're seeing depression and suicide rates for teens increase. Also, students who are in abusive situations who have normally would find a break from that at school or find some sort of safe spot at school, have been struggling with abusive parents or home situations because it's been found that abuse in homes has now increased. So students, teens are suffering and really just having a hard time mentally. And the conclusion is high schoolers have been drastically impacted, and I just hope that there becomes a handle on the virus soon, because these students are very much suffering. So that's all. Thanks for watching.
So I'm going to be talking about how COVID has affected higher education. I'm going to be breaking it down into how it's affected staff, students, the school overall, and then I'm going to be talking about how it will affect the future of higher education, because that's actually where we're going to be seeing one of the biggest differences. Staff was a major concern back in March when everything had really ramped up. Their health was a huge concern because all their students were sent home, but a lot of them were still forced to come into class and report to their workspace. And this was a huge problem because they weren't even given the option to teach from online or to quarantine in their own homes. They were just being forced to come to work. This was a problem at Rutgers and a lot of other colleges. We can still see residual pieces of this. My professor, the first thing he said when the semester started was, listen, my wife is really worried about me being here and teaching here, so if we could all just try to keep it under control, that would be great. So we're still seeing professors that want to be in person and want to teach with their students, but they're still worried. Another huge hurdle for staff and teachers has been reinventing their teaching methods. A lot of these professors have been teaching for 20 or 30 years and they've never had to deal with anything like this. And all of a sudden they have to shift their way of teaching into an online method. I had a lot of teachers who were super worried that we were gonna not be able to have a similar experience to their in-person classes at all. And they did a great job, but a lot of teachers were really worried about that and being able to give their students that. There has been a lot of administration struggles. Administrative issues have been trying to wrestle with whether to prioritize student health or student in-person enrollment. They've been battling with the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, a lot in this issue. There was also a huge debate on whether to leave libraries open for students with bad connection or to not have any in-person buildings at all. Students are grappling with so much instability right now, especially in living conditions and social life. Their living conditions have been incredibly unstable. My RA can attest to the fact that even last semester, the student board would all agree on something one night, and then the next morning an email with completely different information would come out. So things are changing minute to minute. Especially that's hitting freshmen really hard, because when you're just trying to get your bearings on college in general and then you don't even know where you're going to be living the next day, that's incredibly difficult. And that has affected not just freshmen, of course, but college students, their social lives. When you don't know where you're going to be living, that is a huge impact on your social life and the connections that you form, because that's one of the biggest aspects of college is the relationships that you're forming. And when you have instability of where you're living, you're going to have instability in those as well. Susan Gryak points out that we do not have durable forms of online education. That's another problem we're seeing with higher education right now, is we don't have durable online teaching methods. And that's because these things can take months to develop. A effective online teaching method can take months to build, And higher education has not had the time to do that. We've not had that luxury. So what we're seeing is this unstable form of online education that is not sustainable. Classes overall, schools, 20% are primarily in person and 16% are hybrid classes, and the rest are completely online. So we would fall into that 16%. And a lot of these 20% and 16% schools are hoping to get students on campus, living on campus, because that's where a lot of students make, not a lot of students, that's where a lot of colleges make their money, is in room and board. A private college said we make money on dorms, break even on dining, and lose money on everything else. Of course, that's not going to be the same for every school, but they really want students in dorms. As campuses become COVID hotspots, colleges strain under financial pressures. This is going to be a huge problem in the future because these big colleges will be fine. They will recover. But Scott Carlson points out that it takes a long time to kill a college. That's a saying in the industry. And what we're going to see is that a lot of smaller schools are going to suffer under this, and they're going to shut down. And that's going to create a huge disparity in who can afford to go to college. So with COVID taking place, we're seeing so much instability, not only now, but in the future of higher education.
Now the question arises is, what do we do? A lot of studies have shown that a lot of students are going to be in different places due to the inability to have their accommodations and also get the one-on-one experience that they need with their teachers. So studies are saying that schools are going to have to require a lot of diagnostic testing. Thus, they're going to have to tend to specific child's needs instead of a class as a whole. And also, we think that it would be important to show proof of a vaccination once we implement that into society. Additionally, due to all the lost time that we have had within class teaching, we think it would be a great idea to almost mush our whole school year together and take away breaks. Unfortunately, that's what we think is going to have to be done in order for the catching up to be done.